A massive amount of money has already been poured into super PACs during this election, even though we're not even into the general election portion of it. Still in the primaries, massive amount of money. But as impressive as that amount is, and we'll have it for you in just a second, it's even more impressive how few people it took to generate this huge sum of money. So donors in this cycle have given more than $607 million to 2,300 super PACs. SuperPAC Money is on track to surpass the $828 million that the Center for Responsive Politics found was raised by such groups for the 2012 elections. Well, yeah, I would say so, considering that we, again, are still in the primaries. They haven't even really gotten going, especially on the Republican side. But again, the amount isn't what's impressive. It's the tiny little group. You could fit them in a large elevator. Close to half of the money, 41% raised by the groups by the end of February, came from just 50 mega donors and their relatives. 36 of those are Republican supporters who have invested millions. The Post found that the top 50 contributors together donated $248 million personally and through their privately held companies, or more than $4 out of every $10 raised by all super PACs. And to put that in perspective, the influence of those 50 people and their families, this tiny cohort of mega donors supplied more money than the combined contributions of nearly 1 million supporters of Democratic presidential frontrunner Hillary Clinton, whose campaign raised $161 million in the same time period. And I don't have a calculator, but if you divide into that 248 million that the 50 donors generated, that's a lot of $27 donations as well.
Yeah. Well, we do know, easy math, around $5 million a person those 50 donors have given. And Larry Lessig, who, by the way, also participated in Democracy Spring this week, great Harvard law professor, has a brilliant TED Talk about this, where he says, look, this is the money primary. Before anybody else gets to choose, the donors choose who you will choose among, right?
Yeah.
So, by the way, we're not the only country who does this. China has a Politburo, and they decide who your choices are. Hong Kong was so mad because China did the same thing to them when they took over and said, okay, now you'll continue your democracy.
Yeah.
But here are your two choices.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, that's a Hobson's choice, right? In Iran, the mullahs do the same thing. Oh, yeah, we vote, and you'll vote between Mullah A and Mullah B. And for us Americans, as we have this out-of-control legalized bribery, the 50 donors get together and go, here's choice A and choice B, and they both love us to pieces, and that's who you're going to get to vote for. Now, that happens a lot more in non-presidential elections. That is almost the only choice you have in Senate elections, congressional elections. In presidential elections, there's this oddball scenario where you can get enough free media that you might be able to cobble together enough small donations. Yeah. We say that, but really, how many people have done that in the entire history of the United States? Bernie Sanders, only Obama a little bit. 70% of his money were still big donors.
Yeah. Okay? Well, and so it's very important that we acknowledge that. And we have to acknowledge that simply because this small group of donors is giving all this money, that doesn't mean that they agree with each other. They were giving it to Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or whoever and fighting amongst each other, some supporting Donald Trump, many going against Donald Trump. But in terms of their ability to influence the Democratic side, it's easy to say, well, look, Bernie Sanders was able to do it without it. But at the same time, he's been slightly beating Hillary Clinton in fundraising. Hillary Clinton has massively relied on those major donations. Can you imagine if she couldn't fall back on these huge donations and couldn't run all of the ads and all the campaign staff that she has? This is a very tight race in a lot of states. The national numbers are very tight. If she was getting blown out 2-1, 3-1 by his small donor advantage, she might be getting crushed in New York right now. We'll never know, because the system was able to prop her up.
And also on top of that, because like you said, we talked about how CEOs, even guys that are associated with these networks, they give money. So all these things aren't told to people as it's happening. So when the coverage comes, and this is why we bitch and complain. And I know it sounds like it all the time when we're talking about, do you know what happened to Bernie Sanders today? Do you know what CNN said? Do you know the way CNN said at the bottom? That's messed up. And it sounds like we're complaining, but that's coverage. That's another payment form. You know, that's an ad. So when people just flip on CNN, like, oh, Anderson Cooper is he's a straightforward guy. He has a Keep Him Honest segment. Oh, there's Wolf, that's cool. And so you hear 5 minutes of what they say, and if 90% of it is one way versus another, people make their decisions based off that stuff. So that's an ad. It's a constant ad. So when people put tons of money into their political ads and they go, look how much money they dumped in trying to get me in North Carolina, the way Trump was talking about, It happens the entire election cycle against certain people because of the way them and their children give.
Yeah.
When they say family. So your 18-year-old kid knows what he's doing, or do you just say, I'm going to give an extra $2,300 because Dad, I'm going to give nothing because of Uncle. It's constant.
It's their money, yeah.
So, and look about the false choices. So, again, you've got the Bernie Sanders exception. The Donald Trump exception is a bizarre one because he's also a billionaire. So he can give himself as much money as he wants.
Yeah.
Which I don't see as better.
Yeah, I don't see that as like, hey, don't worry. The billionaires can just run on their own. Oh, wow, that sounds like a democracy, right? But Cruz versus Rubio is a perfect example of a false choice. So, Cruz and Rubio are really different. Really? For those mega rich, what is the one thing that Cruz and Rubio wholeheartedly agree on? Cut taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Cruz says he'd like to abolish the IRS. No more IRS. So not only will I cut your taxes to the bone if you're rich, right? By the way, those taxes get shifted later to the poor and the middle class, right? If you're a corporation, I'm going to cut your taxes. But on top of that, I'm not even going to monitor it. So cheat all you want on your taxes because I just got rid of the IRS for you. And Rubio says, yes, we got to cut taxes, cut taxes. And then you look at
And Trump agrees too.
And you minus even Trump, of course, shockingly, he agrees that his taxes should be cut.
Yeah, weird.
Right? You take away the exception of Bernie Sanders, which again is almost an exception that proves the rule because he's the only one to have ever really done it. And what does Hillary Clinton think? She agrees on the trade deals with with Cruz and Rubio. Barack Obama got 70% of his money from big donors. What wound up happening? Yes, the corporate sponsored trade deals. When he raised taxes, you know what he did? He raised taxes, in effect, according to revenue, about 6% above George W. Bush. Remember, George W. Bush had cut him tremendously, right? So he raises it back 6%, and he made the other 94% of the tax cuts permanent, which Bush couldn't even do. So, hey, look at that. It turns out, once again, the donors win and we all lose.
Yeah. Well, I would say that you're being 1% too hard in, and we always say that he only delivers 5% change. He beat it slightly there.
So apparently it was 6%.
And also, finally, I don't want to give you the idea that the only people taking advantage of this are Republicans or people purely donating to Hillary Clinton. There are people with very specific interests as well. The biggest overall contributor to Super-PAC so far is San Francisco environmentalist and former hedge fund manager Tom Steyer, who has put $17 million into a Super-PAC he formed to support candidates committing to reducing climate change, obviously a position that we agree with. He said last month that he plans to pass $70 million. That's what he gave back in 2014. And look, so if we took away Citizens United, we reformed the way that money is put into politics, we would lose that. I would gladly do that. That's totally fine. And then you just have people casually handing off huge sums of money. New York hedge fund billionaire Paul Singer gave $5 million to the Super-PAC allied with Marco Rubio, nearly $5 million more to 9 other Super-PACs, including one working to stop Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. And if he wants to, he'll do another 10 million or 20 million or 50 million because who cares? He'll still be one of the richest people in the country at the end of the day.
Well, so let me give some concrete examples behind that. So we talked about the Daily News ambush of Bernie Sanders last week, and we did some very rough math, John and I did, to figure out how much Mort Zuckerman would save if Bernie Sanders is not elected. And it turns out that it's to the tune of about $100 million a year because he's worth $2.4 billion. A lot of the guys on this list are worth more than $2.4 billion. So $100 million a year for a 4-year term, that's $400 million. So what if you give $5 million here, $5 million there? Because you're going to save $500 million if you get the right lackey into office. So, and by the way, sometimes conservatives will say, oh yeah, well then you don't want Tom Steyer and George Soros and Bloomberg to give any money either, or the unions? And I say, yeah, of course I do. I don't want anybody buying the elections. I want an actual democracy. Well, then in a democracy, conservatives might win. Yeah, it's a democracy. Yeah. They might win or we might win. But wouldn't it be great if that was the actual conversation instead of which donor is going to win?
Yeah. Think about it this way. I don't know, maybe this is a shaky analogy, but I was thinking about it as we were talking. You gamble, am I right?
Yes. Quite right.
You go into a casino in Vegas, there's 15 slot machines, 15 tables, blackjack tables, and people with, $1,000 to bet for the whole weekend come in, and you walk in there with your billions, and you're like, I got 4 people sitting at this table, I got 4 at that table, at all 15 fucking tables. And every once in a while, you let someone drop $1 or $2. You're like, oh, you had your chance, get out of here. Eventually, someone's going to win, and it all comes back to you anyway. You may pay more money at the beginning than these other little small people, but what you're going to get back is all the money for whatever wins. And that's what happens. Like you said, no matter what, they're getting these tax breaks back no matter who wins the presidential nomination and election. They're going to get that money back.
Yeah.
So I'll put up that $100 million. I'm going to get that over 400 back anyway. So I can put that out there. And it's unfair. Obviously.
So that's right. So we're having conversations about, hey, will the guy who hates gays give me my tax cut, or the one who likes gays give me my tax cut? But either way, I'm getting paid because I bought both of them, right?
Exactly.
And in this case, by the way, they point out that 70% of the money goes to Republicans. So that's pretty close to the Barney Frank rule that we talk about, because our reporter asked him, and he said, do you want the Republicans getting all 100% of the donor money instead of 80%? It turns out, no, they're getting 70% of the donor money, at least among the mega donors. And if you're a Democrat, think about it. They have a permanent 70-30 advantage. Why would you agree to that, you schmucks?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, Bernie Sanders, he's trying to get rid of the system. How crazy. No, it'd be crazy to support this system so that you're forever losers. Yeah. And by the way, if you're a Republican or a conservative voter out there, you think, oh, great, it's my advantage. No, it's not. You think they're doing it for you? No! They're just lying to you, telling you pretty little lies, as the Democratic establishment is telling us pretty little lies, to funnel all of the money back to those same donors. It's called crony capitalism, and you hate it, and that's part of the reason why 90% of the country agrees. Get the goddamn money out of politics. Yeah. Wolf-PAC.com. Come with us. Let's all do it together. Wolf-PAC.com.